pretty easy cover. It was one of those I was thinking, it could have been a lock of the week, though early on we would have been sweating it. But it was a pretty easy, smooth ass kicking. And let's face it, I mean, they kind of got gifted a touchdown on the Arden Key sack that is somehow he had to jump. But regardless, the Niners skill guys on a completely different level than anything the Falcons could roll out. I mean,
Falcons look slow.
Sometimes I think when you just watch, a specific team very, very closely, and I know sometimes I think about it with us, like, are we too close sometimes on nitpicking Jimmy and some stuff just because you're in the fire? But I think sometimes we're critical. Obviously, we'll talk about the DBs, and their defense relative to the rest of the NFL is still pretty damn good. Like, the Falcons' defense is atrocious. I mean, they're really bad. No pass rushers, really no team speed. Now, the Niners have blue-chip guys that play well against high-end defenses, but today was, it had a little feel like you would see, you call some games early in the season, right, when it's like Oregon versus,
Stony Brook.
State. It just won it. But wasn't Stony Brook actually kind of a close game for a minute?
Yeah, it was. They were no Pepsi State.
So you get Pepsi State rolling in.
That's my favorite non-directional school.
But then as the game plays on, usually in the third quarter, Stony Brook taps out. That's kind of what happened today. Matt Ryan slow, can't move. They're missing some players, and it's 31-13 where you don't really sweat it at all. To me, once the second half hit, you're just thinking no injuries, especially with a short week. And can they get some of those guys that didn't play back for Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you described, the moment, which is consistently just the most. And, to me, like the Arden Key penalty for the roughing the passer on 3rd and 4, that leads to a touchdown. And immediately, instead of being, maybe they kick a field goal there and maybe they would have gone for it on 4th down. I don't know. And you stop them. All of a sudden, it's tied at 10-10, where it felt like the Niners were about to pull away. But then the Niners get the ball immediately, touchdown. Halftime comes, they strip sack, get the ball, touchdown. It's 24-10 in 2 possessions. But the thing about that Arden Key, that bullshit, just land with your weight on the quarterback. Sometimes I think I hate every version of that play, even when the guy does drive the quarterback. But there are some where you go, all right, in the spirit, I hate that rule, but in the spirit of the rule, that's a guy punishing the quarterback, right? That was not Arden Key punishing the quarterback. But it feels like when the referee calls it, the referees have they have killed the part of them, of their own selves, that know that that's a bullshit penalty. They just throw the flag. They're like, look, guys, I'm not going to have some internal struggle about whether this is right or wrong. I'm throwing the flag because that's what they tell me to do. Just emotionless. They're not even hearing the arguments. That one on the scale of bad to really bad was really bad. And it's the Niners are lucky they were playing the Falcons today. Arden Key looked like Khalil Mack in that game.
One issue I have, Guy, I was just looking at the stats, seeing how many sacks he had, because I felt like he had 3. Really, he had 2. But when you get a penalty, right, a roughing, a late hit, a personal foul, you probably, I bet a lot of times over the last, especially like the last half decade, you beat the offensive lineman. So you are doing the right thing. Now, the penalty, if you're going to give the penalty, you should still get credit for a sack. Like, I feel bad for defensive players that get the penalty taken away. It's like, I fucking drubbed the offensive tackle. And that didn't necessarily happen on that play with Key because it was kind of a late reaction. But think how many sacks get taken off the board over the years with these defensive linemen get paid for sacks. Like NBA players get paid for points,
Yeah, to me, I would differentiate. I would make that play a sack. Now, you hit a guy low or you grab a face mask, I wouldn't make those sacks. But that play, I would make a sack. That's a good call.
Yeah. Just looking out for Arden Key, who I saw he had 3 sacks as a Raider. He has 5 now, and technically should have 6 if that thing had counted with the Niners.
Yeah,
through 13 games. So
the Niners, just part of this is how I think part of the question from that game is how much is it that they played the Atlanta Falcons, that they look fast, aggressive, and I would say it's a lot of them that like consistently now they've changed defensive coordinators. One of the signatures of a Kyle Shanahan team is they play hard. Like they do. When they've been bad, they play hard. When they've been good, they play hard. They do play hard. They fly around. Fred Warner was good today. Tart was all over the place. Obviously, their offensive players, Kittle and Debo, all their running backs.
How about Fred?
Yeah, Fred was really good. Play with aggressiveness. So they were like the Cardinals played a bad team today and were not ready to play. The Niners played a bad team and were ready to play.
we'll get into the Cardinals later. It is a little bit different when you're, a 10-win team, right? We've seen it before with the Niners happen to the Falcons. Again, the Cardinals are coming off a loss, so it's not like they had won 4 straight. But the Niners,
I guess,
to me,
but now because now there's other 10-win teams around them, and
But but remember with the Niners, they had to go till the last week as part of being a 10, 11, 12-win team. Like the Niners have no margin for error, which I give them respect for coming to play and kicking ass and taking names, but they had no choice. Like they have they're hanging by a shoestring really these last 3 weeks, right? With the playoffs, getting in from the Minnesota game, they had to keep maintaining it, and they've done it. Give them credit. They came to play. They kicked fucking ass. They should. My mom can tell they have 7, 8 guys that are on a completely different level than anything. To me, the only guy that jumps out for the Falcons, like, I want that guy, would be Kyle Pitts. It's like, I want that guy. Other than that, Jeff Wilson's a good example today. To me, Jeff Wilson is not as good as Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah.
Just evaluating him this season, just his cuts, his elusiveness, he's just a little stiffer. But today, averages 5 yards a carry, rushed for 110 yards. Like Jeff Wilson against really good teams, where Elijah Mitchell might get you 80, to me, he's probably at like a 40. So he was able to be a very, very productive player. And I'm not diminishing what he accomplishes in an NFL game. It's difficult. But you're playing a team that somehow was 6-7 coming into this game. To me, they felt more like a 3-10 team when you watch them play. It's remarkable they got 6 wins, to be honest with you.
I don't quite get it when I watch.
They beat the Giants. They beat the Jets. They beat the Dolphins when they were shitty. They beat a Saints team missing a quarterback. They beat the Jags. They beat the Panthers. So a lot of their wins have come against really shitty teams, and the Dolphins, who actually are not shitty now, 7-7. Though when you look at the teams they've beat a lot of shitty teams too. So
I am enjoying Tuanon, the Tuanon movement. The people on the internet that say acting like Tua is good. Although I feel like we kind of started it. We just didn't call it Tuanon, but he outplayed Zach Wilson today. Although he had a late pick 6 that was bad. Yeah, Atlanta sucks. They're if the Jerry Matt Ryan runs a lot for a guy that can't really run.
Well, he has to. His offensive line's terrible. It's a huge reason Dimitroff got fired. Their offensive line, and they've invested high picks over the years. You don't need to be some offensive lines, Big Duke, right? Or some fucking Jeff Schwartz breaking down line play. It's clear. Now, the Niners have a active front 4, but holy shit, their guys are bad. I mean, they're just he's in the firing line, it felt like, every play. And it ain't just Bosa, right? It was all their guys were kind of feasting today.
I mean, from the first drive when they took over on the Niners' 9-yard line and they went for it on 4th down, and the Niners swarmed on the Niners swarmed on 3rd down. I don't think it's a game to make any big proclamations off of because, again, Atlanta sucks. But I do think for a year that started and continued with the ghost of DeForest Buckner being a constant conversation, I think this defensive front on balance of the year has played well enough that, if they keep it up and let's say they win a playoff game and they're playing like this, that we might reach a point where we don't have to hear about DeForest Buckner anymore. That would be a welcome to me. I'm so tired of talking about out of nowhere, just like a DeForest Buckner conversation comes up. It wears me out. And I think they're pretty good up front. This is not
I noticed him a couple times last night. He's
he's fantastic. He's just fantastic. But you don't have to be as good. They're doing this without Kinlaw, right? Doing it without Kinlaw.
Well, they did it today without Kinlaw, Greenlaw, and Al-Shaair. Right? I mean, they did it today without a lot of firepower. Now, Kinlaw's been gone. I mean, Kinlaw may never come back. Like D Ford, he just goes away. And they're just rumors are they going to cut him? It's yeah, who even cares? But, I mean, number 51's been one of their better players this year, and he was gone. So I give them, their defense showed up kind of with the mindset back to what I said. A little, I mean, it's not quite. Because the record, you had to take them seriously. But they showed up more like a college game where the team, let's say Oregon was playing a Washington State, right, or UCLA. We know we're better than you, but we got to come to play, and they did. To me, that was like a conference college game where you have a couple good players, you have a pretty good record, but we are fucking far superior, and we kicked your ass, and we're at home, right? And that's just what haven't come accustomed to with Kyle at Levi's. And here's the other thing, Guy. winning this game and just taking care of business because of the shitty start now allows you, we'll talk a lot more probably about the Titans game on Tuesday's pod or Wednesday's pod, but you give that game, coin flip, you win that, all of a sudden we talk about you get the Texans the following week, you're a 10-win team. And that, we were very critical of Kyle. Listen, he did not have a great start to the season. Neither did his players, but the players reflect Kyle. This is football. The coach, everything reflects the head coach. And we'll get into Hightower later, and I'm going to start putting that on Kyle as well. But ultimately, it's a bottom line business. It's black and white. Do you win or do you lose? And you get to 10-7, you cruise to a playoff spot. It's one thing to make the playoffs at 8-9. We're like, remember the Bears last year were 8-8, and I don't think most of their fans really give Nagy credit for that. We're not giving you a playoff berth like a normal playoff berth. To me, at 10-7, I give you credit, right? That's a real record.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's especially when it's you overcoming.
Because 10-7 feels more like the old 10-6 than it does the 9-7, whether that's fair or not.
It's a double-digit number. I mean, tens are different than nines. So I think it is fair. And I think it's different when it's you overcoming adversity on the fly. There's not a lot you can do, for a team in a season. These are adverse situations. You got cornerbacks every week. You got running backs in and out. You've got, they had a lot of injuries early on offensively. Ayuk pulling it together. You don't have a lot of moves within a season to improve your team. And they've become a better football team over the course of the year. Now, part of that is, Kittle getting healthy and Ayuk breaking out and Debo just being Debo. So they've been able to weather some of that storm. But it's a credit to them. That's where the 10-7 to me is when it felt like you might miss the playoffs. You go 10-7. It's really impressive. Now, like you said, we'll talk about Thursday night, but there have been enough games this year in the NFL that weird stuff happens. A good team loses to a bad team. That I think it's easy after you dominate a bad team to go, that's what was supposed to happen. That was a bad football team. But it was in some ways, honestly, it was more dominant than the final score. I don't know where the yards per play end up, but
I wasn't as locked in the fourth quarter, but
yeah.
Anytime you have a game that's over going into the fourth quarter, you feel pretty good about it, right? It's the NFL. It's in December. You're fighting for the playoffs. I think I'm not even doing them enough. I'm almost doing them a disservice. You fucking have a game where you're cruising in the fourth quarter. That's a big deal in December, right?
Especially when you're what they are right now, right? Which is a 6 seed level team. They're not a 2
you're not
seed.
You're not 11-2. It's are they going to be the 1 seed? That is not the case.
They entered the game at 7-6, and you would say right now at 8-6. They are. I don't know if I'd say they're better than the record because here are the other 8-6 teams: Indy, Cincinnati, LA. There's not another LA Chargers. There's not another 8-6 team in the NFC, which is kind of weird, but there's not.
Because the AFC's depth is better, even though the NFC's better at the top.
Yeah, Buffalo's 8-6. I didn't mention them. They're also 8-6. In the NFC, you've got 8-6 San Francisco. Then you've got football team as the 7th seed at 6-7. Then Minnesota and Philly and New Orleans are 6-7. Atlanta's 6-8.
Well, you and I think everyone listening would not be confident the Niners are going to the playoffs if they were in this mix of the Colts, the Bengals, the Chargers, and the Bills, right? You'd be like, well, holy shit, they got to run the table?
Right. Yep.
But they benefit from the NFC at the bottom is just shitty.
And really, Cleveland hasn't played yet. Cleveland is 7-6. Cleveland plays on Monday at 2:00 Pacific against the Raiders, so they could also be 8-6.
Cool.
So
can't wait.
So there's going to, right now, and if Cleveland, we'll see if Cleveland wins or loses that game. But the point is, one of this group, Cincinnati with a win today, jumped from out of the playoffs to into the playoffs. And I think they pushed Buffalo out. And, so one of those teams, Indy, Cincy, Chargers, Bills, one of those teams is not making the playoffs in all that.
But isn't that group a good example? The Niners beat the Bengals in Cincinnati, and they were up 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they had a knockdown, drag-out game with the Colts in a rainstorm, right? And watching the Colts last night, I think there are a lot of similarities to the Niners. Their teams are built a little bit differently, but the Colts are good. The Niners are good. Now, relative to their conference, does that mean they're going to win multiple playoff games? It does feel like the Colts would be more likely just because the matchups. The Niners just do not match up with Green Bay or Tom Brady because they have two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and the Niners can't cover anyone on the outside. It's just like, to me, it's a matchup thing. They cannot cover wide receivers, guys.
I saw him play Green Bay this year when they weren't playing well, and they almost beat them. And they've played well against Aaron Rodgers historically. So
yeah, I just
it's not my preferred matchup, but I do not look at the Packers like the Niners can't beat them.
So you view Tampa in a different world as the Green Bay? Because
Yes.
I cannot view Tampa as a good matchup for the Niners. They have a great run defense, and they have sweet wide receivers.
Say Tampa's also just an uncommon opponent. Like you've done it against Green Bay before, many
True.
times.
I'm not saying that the Niners.
But to answer your question, yes, I do view Tampa as better than Green Bay. Maybe I shouldn't. But.
Yeah, I think Green Bay's gotten better as the season gone on. Again, the Niners have a fatal flaw, and you're playing the greatest quarterbacks ever. Like, that's just that fatal flaw of, what's your fatal flaw? Like, you don't have D tackles? No, I don't have corners. It's like, who are you playing? Oh, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Like, it's hard, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard when the Niners play Joe Burrow, you know, let alone some of these guys. But, like I'm saying, I think the Bengals and the Colts are solid. Like, they're impressive, solid teams. You could argue the Niners might even have slightly more high-end players than those two teams. So if they all played each other 10 times, maybe the Niners, you know, probably beat the Colts 6 out of 10 and maybe beat the Bengals 7 out of 10. So maybe they're better in both, right? If you just had a big sample size. But that's fine. Like, these are real teams. And the Niners have turned themselves in, let's face it, a month and a half ago, like the biggest underachiever in the league, like a disaster, to very respectable. Like going to have a chance to have a respectable season. And honestly, kind of an impressive, gritty season. Because it was headed the wrong way fast.
Yeah. And a shot to, legitimate shot to win a playoff game.
Yeah, they ain't going to be an 8-point underdog, right?
No, even if they're going to Green Bay.
Does feel like Green Bay and Tampa
they're not
Bay.
going. We're talking about week 2 match. We're talking about divisional round matchups now, probably.
No, I'm talking about wild card.
No, I understand, but I'm saying right now Green Bay is the 1 seed and Tampa is the 2 seed, so those are not even wild card round matchups for them.
True, but they all kind of had the same record, right?
I just don't think Dallas, like Tampa. We'll see Tampa play Sunday night before we record this, but Green Bay's 10-3, Tampa's 10-3, Dallas is 10-4. Didn't play great on Sunday.
Yeah, but
Arizona's reeling.
Next week they play the football team. Then they play the Cardinals at home, who are in shambles. Then they play the Eagles, who they own. So it's not crazy. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Dallas. Again, I'm with you. They do not look as good as the other two teams, but they could go 13-4.
They could. They're just not as Dallas is not as good as Tampa. They're just not.
I know, but depending on way the tiebreakers work, who knows? Like, you could get Green Bay or Tampa at the 3 seed. Like, you're just a missed field goal away. That's my point. Like, it's not.
I get it.
Those two teams aren't locks to be the 1 and 2 seed, even though it does feel like they should be. I'm not disputing that, but it's pretty closely jumbled together right now. Like, it feels like in the AFC the Chiefs are going to be the 1 seed, right? I feel pretty confident on that. I'm not that confident the way the NFC's top 4 teams are going to play out.
Well, if the Niners go to Green Bay. Wild card round, what's the number? 3.5?
I'd say 5.5 Packers.
Tampa?
A touchdown? No, I mean, yeah, probably.
No, I think it's 6.5, 7 if you're at Tampa.
Okay, let me rephrase that. I'm pretty confident that Tampa's going to run the table, looking at their schedule. So I don't think you'd have to fuck with Tampa. But I do think Green Bay, like, we've seen them have a weird game here or two over the years, right?
And lose, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, they just had a weird game. I understand the Ravens, and they got a lot of
but hold on though. So
character.
So you said 4.5 Green Bay. You're going to Dallas. What's the number?
Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah,
but I don't view Dallas the equals as those teams. But my point is just the numbers. Like, fuck, they could run the table. It's not out of their own possibility. Their opponents aren't that great. Their toughest opponent is Arizona, who they get.
I just don't think. I think if you're playing Dallas in the first round, you're not shaking in your boots.
No, but my point is, like, the Niners right now would pay whatever $5 million to not seeing Green Bay or Tampa in the first round to get either Dallas or one of the 2 NFC West teams, right?
Right, and I'm saying I put Tampa. I think Tampa would be a tougher matchup for them than Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Aaron Rodgers, who's the best player in the world right now, in my opinion. He had 3 touchdowns a day. Like, he's just. When they beat him 2 years ago in a big game,
they're the 1 seed and you're the 6 seed right now, so they're better than you. But you play them well. Like, that's the thing. You play them well. So, but they have Aaron Rodgers. Plus, Green Bay's cold.
I'd have to go back and watch that game. If I remember, wasn't he slicing and dicing them, and then something weird happened at the end or something? How did I forget how it even got close. He fucking destroyed them that game.
He's much better than them, but I don't know. I don't look at that like it's an unachievable win for them.
Ultimately, styles make fights, and a huge reason the Niners in 19 and then the Harbaugh years, they were always way more physical and they were always tougher. I give Green Bay credit. This last year and a half, I guess it's more than a half. It's a year and 3/4. A.J. Dillon has added a huge physical element. Their defense is more physical. Like, to me, they're a little bit different team than I think the Niners beat the shit out of twice in 19. And Aaron's in a completely different level as a player now than he was that year. He's the same guy, but he's playing at a much higher level.
Yeah. And the Niners are worse in the secondary. But
they're terrible.
If it's cold and snowy and it's, and you're healthy enough at running back, like if Elijah Mitchell's playing for you, you can hang in that game. Now, a lot of that falls to Jimmy. But I think, like, back to the earlier point, the Niners have put themselves in great shape at 8-6. They just have. I mean, it's like when you go back and look at, what they were and what they are now, I think part of it is that even though they do have a fatal flaw, as you said, I think their pass rush has been fantastic. Like, really good. And it's made their defense more than serviceable. I think they're going to play well again on Thursday against the Titans.
Well, they have one of the best players in football right now in 97. And to me, he changes everything and the domino effect on the line. That if you could ever, big picture, get a little more talent next to him, it kind of is clear looking back, and he's clearly a better player now than he was as a rookie. But when you put all that, when you have such a dominant edge rusher and then you have talent down the line, there is no stopping them. And we remember how dominant they are. They are doing this with Arden Key, who was a disaster for the Raiders, who was a scrap heap signing. Ebukam, who anyone could have had. I mean, Armstead is one of the guys they've drafted in the first round they've paid. But beside him, they do not have highly touted guys next to him. So it does show you that, like, he deserves a lot of credit because he's making these guys. You have to spend so much energy. He's just never stops. And then these other guys, because of the way Chris Kasarik, that Jim Washburn coaching style, is just play with your hair on fire. Like, we'll give up some, you didn't hold the edge on a comeback, on like an end around, whatever. Just get up the field and cause fucking havoc. And that's one thing their defensive. How many sacks do they have when Bosa kind of crashes one end and the quarterback kind of has to rotate to the other side? And then he's like, holy shit, there's like three guys over here. The guy's rotating around. And they just, you know why? Because that style that Chris, and I was around Washburn for 2 years with the Eagles, it is not allowed to not play hard. You're allowed to fuck up. Like, you are allowed to not contain. You're allowed to miss a tackle. If you are playing full speed every single rep, that's celebrated in the room. And that's one thing that clearly stands out in that unit. They just, and they do have, he clearly likes pretty long, like they have some size.
They have
like
a
all their
type.
guys are 6'4".
They have a type. I thought this, when I saw Arden Key get that first sack, it was just clear. Like, you think about,
he's not little.
You watch other guys celebrate, like they have a type. And again, you go, well, don't most D-line coaches want big-ass dudes? Yes. But they look like an SEC team relative to their opponents. I mean, these are big, big, big guys. And you're right. They get them playing really hard. Their depth up front without Kinlaw. It's been one of the most impressive things of the season, the way they've played up front without Kinlaw. And a lot of it's Bosa. Bosa has the effect that we always talked about Justin Smith having for Aldon Smith. Bosa seems to have that effect for everybody. And it's not just in the pass rush. It's also when they play the run really hard and well.
Oh, yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, I think Fred Warner was great. It started on that first series where he had the pass breakup on Lee Smith in the end zone. But they're just, I think one of the reasons they're in great shape is partly the conference, but they've just separated. There is wouldn't you say there's a clear cutoff line in the NFC right now? And it's after the 6th seed. There was a point in time when you looked up and the Niners were like 2-4, and the group of teams that they were bunched with, the teams that were kind of their peers, were middle of the road football teams. Now they are the cut line is under them. The 7th seed, someone's going to make it because there's 7 teams that make the playoffs. but they are clearly ahead of that group of teams.
I hate doing this because I philosophically don't believe in looking in the rearview mirror and holding on to shit. And like things happen, you got to move on. You spilled milk, you fucking just clean it up and go. But God, they got to be kicking themselves. Can you imagine if they just just one of the games that they flubbed, right? If they right now were, 9-5, you'd just be all of a sudden, who knows this? When do the Rams play? Tuesday.
The Rams play Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah. So that Tuesday night game
at 4
would be a
4
big
o'clock.
swing. I'm in. I'll watch.
4 o'clock Pacific. It's a 4. The game is in LA. It's 4 o'clock in LA on Tuesday.
Those two teams still play. Like they don't get the following week moved back, right? They got to play again on Sunday. Kind of sucks. But they'd be right there because they would still play the Rams again. Arizona's coming back to earth. You can't do that. But it just shows you they deserve. Right. You said 2-4, guy. They were 2-5. 2-5. And that's just. I think they showed today they were 5-1 in their last 6. Now they must be 6-1 in their last 6. Like they have rattled off a lot of wins.
No, they were 2-4, 3-5.
They were 3-5. So they've won 1, 2,
5 of 6.
5 of 6
since the Arizona loss.
And really 6 of 8. That Arizona lose. What loss is worse? Because they're both divisional losses.
I mean, the
Cardinal
Seattle
game,
loss,
Colt McCoy, or the Seattle game, the way it looked.
Yeah, I mean, the Arizona loss it was Colt McCoy. They kicked your ass with Colt McCoy, and now they might fall back to you, and you've already lost to them twice. So in that way, that one hurts. But Seattle's just a worse team than Arizona, and that was when you were playing well. So they're both bad. Once I think on paper the Arizona game feels worse because of who the starting quarterback was. The day of, I'd say Seattle's worse just because Seattle. Actually, let me rephrase this. Arizona's worse. Seattle is the one you look back and go, "What if?" Moron, yeah. I think
because at least you just got your ass kicked. Like that was not a close game. Honestly, when I see 31-17, it's like God, I remember it being like 50-10.
I know. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, the homer punt return, the fumbles, the picks. I mean, it was an embarrassment against Seattle. It really was. That to me is because even the Indy game, which was obviously a really tough loss, it wasn't a complete monsoon. And we can nitpick, and I remember you did. Like Kyle's problem there is like you're getting they were just throwing it up to get PIs. You'd probably get the same, but in a monsoon, a little bit of a coin flip type weird game.
Forgot about that.
That was a bad game.
They've had some but this is, there are years
that's where I think perfect. The Colts fall under that too. Like they're 2 8-6 teams. I think the Colts would tell you we fucking kicked a couple games.
Yeah. There are years that are perfect, there are years that are not. This one is not, but in some ways the adversity you face reveals the character of your team. And it's been impressive. It's not done, but there's only 3 games left. One of them is the Rams. We'll see what position the Rams are in by the time Week 18 rolls around, January 9th. But Tennessee on Thursday. Then don't forget who they play January 2nd, the Texans. So they're playing well, man.
It feels like?
They're playing well.
It feels like Tiger Woods probably in his prime. And if the season was a golf tournament, you shoot 80 opening round. You shoot 80. You're like, oh, my God, is Tiger going to miss the cut by 17 shots? Comes back, finds a way to shoot 64 and makes the cut. Now, he's not going to win the tournament, but all of a sudden it's just puts together another 68. And he's just right now in 20th. It's all of a sudden you let him get hot on Sunday. It's like these last 3 games. You're going to look up and he's going to finish top 10. Now, they're not going to win the Super Bowl. I'll be floored if they win the Super Bowl. But they beat this Titans team. Then they beat the Texans. All of a sudden it's like, God, are they the hottest team in the NFL going into the playoffs? You want to peak late. Could they make some noise? And if you make noise, you win a playoff game as an underdog on the road. I know it won't feel like that. If they were to win a game and the following week they lose, it would hurt, right? But big picture, taking a step back a month after the fact, it would be a huge success for Kyle to win another playoff game, right?
Yeah.
When it looked like he wasn't going to sniff the playoffs. We were talking people getting, maybe not him, but people getting fired and moves
And don't you think there's a difference, though? Even it looked like they weren't going to make the playoffs. Then they reached another level where it looked like, they might make the playoffs because the NFC sucks, but what is that really going to represent? And now they're actually playing like a team that deserves to be a playoff team, looks like a playoff team, and who knows? could win a playoff game. And then, you win one. The next thing you know, you're in the divisional round.
Did you see the slow motion of on Juszczyk's touchdown that made it? It would have made it 10-3. So on their first touchdown of the game, the Trent Williams down block of I don't know who the guy was. Oh my God. It looked like high school. It looked like a guy that you'd be like, this guy is going to Georgia or Alabama. This kid is just hoping to get into fucking college, to not play sports, but just to gain an education.
That guy's going to tell people about the time he played against Trent Williams.
Destroyed him. Oh my God.
St. Joseph Catherine's Catholic going up against Trent Williams.